Hello everybody, we're back with easy weeknight cooking with Heart's Desire spice blends, and tonight we're doing a really fresh, easy tomato basil pasta dish where the pasta is totally optional. I've had this with just on a beautiful bowl. I've had it over zucchini, I've had it over pasta, I've had it over spaghetti squash. It is awesome stuff. And what's more, it's really easy. Tell us where you're coming on from and let's get cooking. So what are we going to need tonight? We are going to need, of course, our blend of the month, Greek seasoning, about 2 cups of cut tomatoes. We are using great tomatoes tonight. We're going to need about 1 medium or 2 small onions. Gorgeous stuff. 4 cloves of garlic. Do not skimp on the garlic unless you really hate the stuff or are allergic to it, because honestly this really makes the dish. 8 ounces of mushrooms, and I like a really big chop on these because I like getting just a really big piece of mushroom in there that almost fills the fork with everything else. It adds a really beautiful amount of texture. And we are going to need about a 1/4 cup of pine nuts. Pine nuts are just gorgeous. I love the flavor, I love the texture. These are optional. About 3 tablespoons of olive oil, of course. You know, we need something to saute with, right? What I'm going to be doing tonight is I'm going to be putting this over angel hair pasta, and we put a chicken through the smoker last night, and just wonderful stuff. So I'm going to put a little bit of chicken next to it as well. So I'm going to turn off the pasta water because it is on a high boil right now, and let's get cooking. First things first, what am I going to do? I'm going to toast my pine nuts. Now, if you guys haven't toasted pine nuts before, keep an eye on them. They burn really easily, but oh boy, does the toasting bring out the flavor. Oh boy. So I'm going to, on a dry pan, I'm going to turn up the heat just to high and get that cooking. Meanwhile, we've got a couple of things to chop still. We've got some of our grape tomatoes. I'm just going to cut these in half. You know, as you can tell, they're not really huge. If you're going to be using cherry tomatoes, you may want to cut them in thirds. If you're using like Roma tomatoes or tomatoes on the vine, you're going to give them a rough chop. And there's that. We're going to cut up the rest of our onion. We're going to cut a little bit of basil. Isn't that gorgeous? I love basil. Basil is so fragrant and just wonderful stuff. So we're going to be also teaching you how to do a chiffonade of basil tonight. It's super simple. It's a lot easier than it sounds. Take a feel of what the pan's doing. Okay, not quite. I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of my grape tomatoes in half real quick. This does feel like it is warm enough now. We're going to throw a 1/4 cup of basil right into the pan. I'm going to just move my pine nuts around in the pan. Like I said, super dry pan. And as the pan heats up, it's actually going to toast those nuts. And toasting nuts like this is called dry frying. You can do this to seeds and nuts and a lot of your seed spices. We do this to our curry before we grind it. We do this to our Mexican chili powder before we grind it. At least we do that for anything that is not a leaf spice or pre-ground spices like turmeric. So anyway, as you do this, you're going to see your pine nuts actually get a little oily on the outside. You're going to start seeing them get shiny, and that's a good indication that you need to kind of start moving them around a little bit, or else they're going to burn. They burn very easily, so do be careful with that. And there we go. We do have some nice color on those now. We can take them off heat, right back into our container, and they almost smell like popcorn. It's really kind of neat. There we go. Now, if you've ever dealt with sesame seeds, this is a gorgeous thing to do with sesame seeds as well. It just brings out a lot of the flavors. It brings out kind of the butteriness of them. And it's just so good. Seriously, so good. So now that our pine nuts are successfully done, we're going to go ahead and cut up the rest of our onion. Like I said, go ahead, cut it into a quarter. And from here, it is just so much easier to pull this skin up, just like so. There you are. And if you're in a hurry, go ahead and quarter your onions and do that. And that way it makes less of a mess. I'm doing one more slice just right down the middle of the onion, right here, and still holding on to the root end. You can just do a quick chop there. And the root end actually keeps your onion from going anywhere while you're trying to chop it, especially at that last end where it always wants to slip everywhere. Makes it a lot less dangerous. And you just go ahead and take the root end off. Go ahead and put that on into my bowl. So I have my onions cut up, I have my tomatoes cut up, all of my mushrooms are all cut up, our pine nuts are toasted, and we've got our cloves of garlic right here. I do have a wonderful little tool right here. Now, believe it or not, I've had this garlic press for almost 20 years. You can see it's getting there. But this is actually a Pampered Chef garlic press, and I don't know that I would go anywhere else yet, though I've heard tell there are some that are even better. If you're serious about your garlic, go ahead and invest in a really good garlic press, guys. Seriously. Let's go ahead and throw in a little bit of oil just to coat the bottom into a nice hot pan. So I'm going to turn my heat back on, and while my oil is heating up, I'm going to throw my pasta, because this is angel hair pasta. It doesn't take long to cook, and honestly, this does not take long to cook either. Seriously, it doesn't. So I'm going to throw my pasta right into my water, because that's going to take, what, about 8 minutes, and I think we're going to be pretty much done when that is. We've got our oil heating up. Oh boy, our oil is hot. It is running all over the place. So we're going to go ahead and throw our onions in right away. Oh, I love that sound. Move them around, see if we can make sure that everything gets full contact with the pan. And that is going to be, I'm going to turn that down to, say, about a medium-high heat, because I still have a couple of other things to do over here, like get a couple of snippets of basil. Now, fresh basil is so wonderful, and what I'm going to be doing with this is, when I cut this, I'm going to try to make sure that when I cut it, it's just above a node like this, where there's leaves coming out. And that way, those leaves can come back. And so when you're dealing with fresh herbs like that, make sure you cut above a node where there's leaves, or you can see that there used to be leaves, or could be leaves, that kind of thing. There we go. And I think really this is all we need, these 3 snippets right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to layer these on top of each other and pull them out. Normally when you chiffonade basil or something like that, you roll it up. And something that not everybody knows is with basil, you can also use the stem. It's so beautiful. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and give this a toss because it's looking really good. And I'm going to chiffonade my basil, and then, now chiffonading basil basically means that you're making long, thin strips out of your basil, which is why they're normally rolled up. So you basically get shreds. I'm going to cut up my stem as well, because there's a lot of great flavor in the stem. And so you have chiffonade basil. Now, this is just going to stay right here. And what we're going to do is now we're going to, let me see. I'm going to add the mushrooms and let them start to cook. Now, our onions are just starting to get kind of a golden brown. It's at a medium-high heat, which means that you do have a good amount of browning. And I want to make sure that my mushrooms are coated with whatever juices are in the bottom of the pan right now. And that will actually help them brown. The next thing we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be adding the Greek seasoning and the garlic after the mushrooms have a little bit of browning on them. And honestly, you can go ahead and put the mushrooms in with the onions right to begin with. Sometimes I want to get a little bit more caramelization on the onions before I get the mushrooms in. We are starting to get some good smells here. I'm going to turn this up. There we go. And we are starting to get a little bit of browning on the mushrooms. See? Now, I'm doing this in a non-stick pan, which is awesome. A really great non-stick pan is beautiful for this kind of application. You don't want to use an enameled cast iron for this because all of this wonderful acid in the tomatoes is going to strip the seasoning. Do you hear that or what? I love the sound of frying stuff. And I'm getting a lot of great smells here. The mushroom's starting to express a little bit of juices into the bottom of the pan. And the mushrooms are starting to brown. So now, throw in my garlic, because my garlic definitely wants to go in before the tomatoes. Okay. And one of the things I love about this garlic press is that right there. That is the skin of that garlic clove. No peeling necessary. There we go. Gotta love that garlic. Sweet. Go ahead and put that aside. Give this a really good toss. And honestly, the garlic is what really makes this. It gives that just wonderful pungent flavor that you would expect from things like a little bit of extra white wine or something like that in there without it. And I just find that amazing. So do not skip on the garlic in this. Next, I need a teaspoon of Greek. Right on in there. And my tomatoes. Oh my gosh, that Greek smells amazing in there. Wow. Now, why we chose Greek for this? Okay, give this a good toss. You see all that wonderful color? Oh my word, you need to see that. The reason we chose Greek for this is, first of all, this is Italian. You need your garlic, you need your rosemary. And what's more is the Greek's got all that wonderful lemon juice crystal in it. And that brightens your flavors so well. That plus a little bit of black pepper in there, a little bit of garlic and onion, always, right? And the whole 9 yards, you're a little bit of thyme, and so that makes a huge difference with this stuff. Now, what you're going to do here is you're going to kind of wait until your tomatoes wilt a little bit and start giving off their juices. This will actually make a really neat sauce, if you will. And you'll notice that they are wilting enough when the skin starts shriveling off a little bit. My mouth is watering so bad right now. This is great. So we do have a little bit of shrivel going on a couple of these tomatoes. We want a little bit more because we also want the tomatoes to cook a little bit and have a little bit of that cooked flavor, not just a raw flavor. Because a raw tomato is wonderful, it's fresh, it's pungent, but there's something about that cooked flavor in there that just adds another dimension. But you don't want it a full cooked canned spaghetti sauce kind of flavor at all. You want those fresh notes to stay in here. There we go. So we now have some of that wonderful texture in there. Now's the time to pull it off heat. I'm going to go ahead and throw in my basil. And my pine nuts. Is that gorgeous or what? Seriously. And give it a toss. And what this is going to do to the basil, the reason we put the basil in last is the fresh basil has a really great flavor of its own, but as it wilts, it gives off some of that flavor. Now, we don't want the basil to totally wilt and just go limp, but we do want some of that just beautiful texture in there. We do want the flavors coming off. And there you go. Oh, I love this stuff. Now, we have some pasta over here that needs to be drained. So I will be right back and do that, and we will plate up. So we have ourselves some beautiful angel hair pasta. I'm going to put some of this loveliness on the pasta. And also, there we go. Yes. Is that gorgeous or what? Oh my gosh. I want to eat this right now so bad. Ah! Oh gosh. So there it is, from our house to yours. A beautiful, just really fresh tomato basil pasta. You can do it without the pasta. Trust me. You guys keep things tasty